we are seeing that companies that are good at structured data tend to be good at AI and unstructured data, especially those in the regulated camp. They've had to get their act together in terms of governance for longer, and therefore they can spring into AI faster.
Welcome to It's About Data, episode 82. We're joined by Kevin Petrie and Merv Adrian of BARC to discuss a recent study on harnessing unstructured data for AI innovation.
Well, welcome. This is a very special, discussion we're about to have here with a couple of very old friends. Emphasis on the old, no, emphasis on the friends. We'll start off basically with the person who I really consider to be like my original mentor in getting back into data after about a decade in exile in middleware, which is Merv Adrian. And then I could basically go from mentor to tormentor, basically to Kevin Petrie, who I shoveled out the abuse. He reminded me of this. I totally forgot about that. You reminded me of this and wrote a very nice LinkedIn post about that, about how and how after all these years we could be friends. I don't know how I could be friends after that, but anyway,
That was fun.
you folks are or affiliate with a firm called BARC. Does it actually stand for anything? Is that an acronym, or is that just kind of a clever 4-letter word?
It's a good question. I believe it's Business Application Research Center.
Gotcha. Just like SAP was software and application programs.
There you go.
And once done, everybody forgot that. So yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly. But tell us, and Kevin or Merv, tell us a little bit about the background of BARC in terms of independent analyst firms. And this is an era which is not a great era for the analyst business. You guys have been growing remarkably, especially with Sean basically taking over the U.S. operation. But you have, I think is really key to what you guys do is you have a very unique methodology, and it's very data driven. And so can you just dive in and basically sort of introduce us to who BARC is, and then we'll get into we'll cut to the chase where you're talking about the governance of unstructured data. But we'll get to that.
I'll just put a little gloss on one thing you said. Sean created the U.S. operation. Sean founded it together with our European CEO Karsten Bang, who put the original organization together. He and Sean had done business in a variety of ways for decades. But they decided it was time to have a U.S. operation to supplement the organization that has been and continues to be extremely successful in Europe. BARC is an organization that was founded in Europe. And let me take a breath and let Kevin say a few things about this.
Yeah, well said. We're a global research and consulting firm. I believe Karsten got started 25 or 30 years ago. And we do qualitative and especially quantitative research about adoption trends and best practices. And where I get very excited, and I think Merv as well, is that our survey primary research goes deep on specific technology adoption trends. And we do sophisticated crosscuts to isolate leaders, compare them to everyone else, to isolate North Americans, compare them to Europeans, IT departments, compare them to others. And you can really get a granular sense of what's real. And that's so important because there's so much hype and noise about AI and all things related to AI. Merv and I really enjoyed cutting to the chase here.
One other point, though, which I want to ask you about, because you pointed this out, is that there are lots of surveys out there. And you can see surveys that'll go a mile wide and inch deep. But there's something very unique to your methodology. And Merv, you were just starting to describe that before we got on the call. So I was wondering if you can kind of tell us, because I think that'll lend some very useful nuance to what we're going to be talking about.
Sure. Thank you, Tony. As you know, I've been through a couple of the largest research firms in my career, and I've seen a variety of ways to approach primary research. So when I got the opportunity to come into BARC as a fellow, when I sat down with Sean to talk about what kinds of work we were going to do, I was really excited about the opportunity to have both the ability to design the way the questions would be asked and a powerful engine of analysts available to us to do a lot of the crunching and give us some of the mechanical stuff back really quickly that allow us to do intriguing cuts of the data. Kevin suggested it, and you referred back to it. For example, one of the things we haven't gotten to yet that I'm really eager to do in our next piece that we're starting to plan now is take a look at the differences in response to some of these questions between organizations that operate in a regulated industry and those that don't. It's a very interesting filter, and we expect to find a couple of surprising things.
Mm.
There are also differences, especially around governance, when you think about multinational versus, well, local firms. If you're operating nationally, governance means very many things in very many different places, and you're going to have to be pretty sophisticated.
Well, it means very different things in Europe versus the United States, right? Like we have very different ideas about corporations in the United States versus Europe, but also the regulatory environments are different. And in Europe, it also varies country to country quite a bit. So these are very important things to be asking.
We use that specifically. Let me let Kevin talk to that, because we took a couple of our questions and ran that filter and said, how did the Europeans compare? And Kevin, over to you. Pick one or two.
Yeah, so we found some interesting results. Starting with a survey that Sean and Merv did two years ago now. We have 7 questions to isolate AI leaders, the folks who have governed cross-functional programs that go across the business. Those folks are doing the right things with AI. It's consistently about 20% of the market. Well, a higher percentage of them are in North America than Europe. So I think North Americans, more of them are leaders. More of them are in production with agents. And they're actually, surprisingly, better at governance, or more mature with governance. You would expect the opposite, given the role of regulation with the EU AI Act, and of course with GDPR, which came out before the CCPA or commensurate legislation here in the US. But the Europeans actually do have some catching up to do in the areas of governance. And that all applies to unstructured data too. So focus.
Right, and that really cuts to the chase here.
If I may, Tony, I wanted to, because you pointed out that methodologically we're doing a couple of things that are different. One of the things we avoided at the very beginning was asking people how mature they are. First of all, nobody
17-year-old all the time.
Yeah, nobody does this well, right? So what we did was we came up, as Kevin pointed out, with 7 specific metrics. You know, you're creating a plan. You have a governance process in place. You've got ways to resolve disputes. All those kinds of things. They are literally binary. You're either doing it or you're not. You have a program or you don't have a program. You're considering it or you haven't even thought about it. When we got the answer to those questions, we discovered, as Kevin said, about 20% of people were in the highest category of preparedness across all 7. We didn't begin with the idea we were going to identify leaders, but as we worked through the work, this was the work that Sean and I did about 2.5 years ago, we said, you know what, these people are likely to be the leaders. That was proven out a year later when we went back with a very, very similar set of questions to a new survey and compared the productivity. This wasn't about what's your architecture going to be. This was about what have you got in production. What we found was the people that we identified as leaders according to these criteria were dramatically more productive than the ones who were not. Literally 10 times, what was it, 30% of them, Kevin, were doing 10 times the number of projects that the non-leaders were. It was quite remarkable.
Yeah, much further in production across the board.
Wow.
Right.
And so can you connect the dots pre-AI with structured data to post-AI with unstructured data? Is that what you're seeing, that if you're mature and structured, you also become mature and unstructured?
That needs to be tested experimentally.
Okay.
But it's the right question to ask. And I'm talking too much. Kevin, why don't we talk a little bit about whether they can find it and know what it means or not today?
Yeah, that's a good one too. We do find that over time, consistently, structured data remains the favorite input for AI, and as it should. Most trusted, verifiable facts come from tables, and that'll always be true. So that's where you need to start. But quickly, as you start talking about context and building rich context about user intentions, business conditions, and so forth, that's where you do need that long tail of proprietary, unstructured data. And so I think that we are seeing that companies that are good at structured data tend to be good at AI and unstructured data as well, especially those in the regulated camp. If they're dealing with higher levels of regulation, healthcare, finance, utilities, telecom, and so forth, they've had to get their act together in terms of governance for longer, and therefore they can spring into AI faster. It's paradoxical, but the regulated companies have a better foundation to move faster with AI.
One of the most obvious manifestations of that is auditability, right? It's a
Yeah.
question we started asking at the very beginning, and frankly, the results were a little disappointing, even where auditability was an absolute requirement given the regulatory environment.
Right.
So there's still plenty of delusion out there. The hallucinations are not all coming from the AI engines.
Yes. Yes. Well, anyway, let's cut to the chase here, which is that your current, I mean, it was really valuable background in terms of you guys didn't just start surveying AI maturity yesterday.
No.
What you're currently looking at in the current study is looking at governance of unstructured data. And what I found very interesting was that you said that, maybe it shouldn't be that surprising that companies that were that previously that you're able to identify through your framework as having greater maturity in AI maturity with structured data tend to have basically at least a first step advantage with unstructured. But that being said, reading through the results, there's still a lot of white space there.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so why don't you go through some of your top findings here? And as I said, in our next episode, we're going to really dig a lot deeper.
Sure. We found that about 3/4 of organizations say they're confident they can extract value from unstructured data within their governance guardrails. But only 29% of them feel fully confident their unstructured data is discoverable and usable. So there's a confidence gap. And most organizations, I think 70% of organizations, say that less than half their unstructured data is discoverable and usable for AI. So if you picture an organization that wants to gain competitive advantage with AI, not simply hand ChatGPT or better yet Anthropic to their knowledge workers to boost productivity, but actually stitch AI into their proprietary processes and insights, that requires a long tail of unstructured data, emails, documents, and so forth. And companies have only started to scratch the surface there. A lot of it won't be necessary for AI, but they at least need to start by classifying, evaluating, cataloging everything, discovering it, and then figuring out what to use.
There used to be a joke about the guy in the street encountering a man who was searching for his car keys. I don't know if you remember this joke. He's running around on his hands and knees under a street lamp looking for his keys, and the man walks down the street to the store, comes back, and he's still there, still looking. And he says to the guy, "You haven't found your keys yet?" And he says, "No." "Well, have you looked over there?" And he says, "No, light's better here." You start with your structured data because it's easy to find,
Right.
right? You know where it is. You already have definitions for it. You've probably got semantics for it. That stuff is already in place, but we've already got all that stuff. The interesting information about consumer sentiment, some of the suggestions that Kevin made earlier about, what else is going on in the environment. Was there a sale on in the store that day? Was it raining? Is that why we sold more umbrellas? That stuff isn't captured in the cash register receipts. If you don't combine these things, you don't have the ability to create the full context to reason over. And that's the point. So it's troubling when 79% of them tell us we're very confident about our ability to understand and get value out of our unstructured data. But in the same survey, only 30% of them say that they can find more than 50% of it. That's the kind of cognitive dissonance that really pops out of this survey to me. There is still, I think, a belief that doing some of these new things is just a next step on the same technology continuum we have been moving over for the last 20 years. And it's not. This is a fundamentally stepwise progression in how we do computing. The use of unstructured data requires new skills, new navigation, new semantics, new governance. And it won't just be a little bit of enhancement of what we're already doing. It's going to be radical.
Yeah. Well, and I want to speak to what you said, Kevin, about accessing emails. And I think that type of example, that type of data, underscores exactly why you need governance to move fast. And that is, suppose I'm a product leader, I manage the company's main product, and I'm exchanging emails about future plans about that product, and my AI leaks those product plans to a call center worker who's also using the AI to ask a question about a customer query. That would be bad, right? Like, that call center worker has very different incentives. They might want to leak that to the press. They might want to do any number of things. They might sell it to a competitor. So maybe one of you can talk a bit about the challenges that unstructured data brings to the governance world. And then in the next episode, we'll get into how to address some of those challenges.
Yeah. I think that there are really important dynamics. Security is rising fast as the list of obstacles. Data quality went from about number 5 among list of obstacles 2 years ago. It's now number 1, as it should be. But security is also
metric that they want to apply.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but security is a big one too. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of organizations need to figure out, it starts with, we are finding a lot of companies are classifying and validating their unstructured data. So classifying is important because you can use some basic tagging methods, keyword searches and things to find potential PII or governance risks and thereby treat it
Right.
in a more secure fashion, making sure it doesn't leak into the hands of a customer service rep who unwittingly shares that with the world. And that's one very good of many examples.
As a refugee from IT myself, over the course of my career, it's encouraging to see that the value of IT's contribution is beginning to be understood better. When we ask people, what are the problems? Well, the guys in IT are saying data quality and semantic accuracy are really, really important here, and the business respondents don't quite get that. This is an opportunity for
Right.
IT to add value by walking into the business meetings and saying, "Look, guys, I understand where you're going, but right now we have to solve this quality problem.
Right.
We've got to solve this semantic problem, or what you're going to get is useless."
Yeah, it's really interesting here, and I think this is a good wrap up, transition, go to our next episode. But the thing is that what you're talking about, in some ways, I see like history kind of repeating itself. I remember during the dawn of data warehousing, we were all basically euphoric about we're finally about to liberate data from what we call data jailhouses. And there was one guy in the back of the room. I don't know how many times I've told this story over the years. And he just started screaming. He was obnoxious as all hell. He kept saying, "Do you know how bad your data is?" He was obnoxious, but he was right, and IBM eventually bought his company. But anyway, no, I think some problems, I mean, it's kind of like, the more things change, the more they remain the same. But on the other hand, semantics is not something we really thought about, consciously, because it was implicit, given it was in the same walled garden of data. I think that really sets us up for our next discussion.
There's a difference between building semantics and discovering them.
Definitely, and that's what we'll
We're
talk
in
about.
the era where we are actually attempting to discover them in places where we're not even quite sure what's there yet.
Exactly. Anyway, thanks for taking the time. Thanks for joining us on this episode. We've really been defining the problem. I still don't think we've really scratched the surface, but hopefully, our goal here is to start the conversation. In the next episode, we'll be looking at, like, what do we do? How do we attack either these known unknowns or unknown unknowns? Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you.